All right, welcome everyone to session 6 of our 6-week series. It's kind of our grab bag edition. We got a couple topics we're gonna focus on, but if we have time, we'll venture out wherever people are interested in. So today we're gonna talk about calculated fields and also about kind of where to start on an object when you're starting a multi-step report. As a reminder, we have been saving these calls into a playlist on YouTube. Last week, our recording portion of the call went a little long, so I split it up into 2. So we already have 6 sessions up there. Today will be the last 7th session. So I encourage folks to go check it out. For folks who are just popping into this recording and haven't learned about Apsona, Sona in Hindi, it means gold, and we call ourselves the golden app. We're a very crucial app for many admins out there. A lot of people won't do Salesforce without Apsona because it's so helpful. And we've been on the App Exchange since 2011, and we support any object, any data model, managed or unmanaged, standard or custom. Apsona can access it all. Okay. So based on feedback from folks, one of the topics I want to talk about today in our grab bag is just kind of this concept of, hey, I know I need a multi-step report or even a single step report, frankly, but I just don't know where to start. What object do I start with? And so we're going to talk about that. And I was very lucky in that I was on a call yesterday. Oh, I got a few more people that showed up that I'm going to open up for speaking. Welcome, Chuck. Chuck's a coworker of mine, and I promoted Chuck to panelist, so you should be able to speak as well, Chuck. Let me get everybody else unmuted here.
Thanks, Chad. Glad to be here.
Hey. So as a reminder for folks that just showed up, I'm trying to make this session a little bit more interactive because it's a bit of a grab bag, and there's a lot of smart people that know some of these things better than I do. And so feel free to jump up. You can raise your hand, but if it's an appropriate kind of point, feel free to just unmute yourself and talk. I think that's totally fine for today. So we're starting off our discussion about the concept of where to start in a report. Yesterday, I was on a call and I was troubleshooting with a customer who happens to be an AffiniQuest user as well. And they were struggling with the data model that they had in front of them for, I think, a different org than they normally do work for. So they were a little less familiar with the data model. And so I want to just kind of talk through the experience because it really exemplified the struggle that we all go through when we think about where do I start. So I'm going to try to tell the story and develop this image as we go, because it was just an interesting process for all of us on the call to go, oh, wait a second. Oh, yeah. And then we finally got to a good answer. So at first, the charge for this person was, hey, we need to run a multi-step report. We want to pull in information about this society membership object. And, everyone's got their own different data models, so you can kind of replace things with what you know. I think the important piece here is how things are related. So, child, parent, is it a junction object? Those concepts can traverse the specifics of the data model. So in this case, we have this thing called a society membership. Society memberships have assets underneath them. And so the asset is the child object, and it has a lot of qualities about it. Society memberships are also kind of living above the kind of main core gift pledge object. And so this society membership is at the top. So if we were to translate this into standard terms, it might be account with an opportunity and contacts, different objects, both children to the account. And so the request was, hey, we want to build this report, but we need to filter it. We want to only see society memberships when their assets are of a certain quality and their gifts are of a certain quality. All right, no problem. In this scenario, what kind of report do we need? We don't even need a multi-step report for this. This is 3 objects. They're all related. We got one at the top. So we could easily start with society membership as our object on a single step report, frankly, and then filter it by qualities of its children. That's no problem. And then the request changed. I'm sure folks are familiar with that concept. They said, oh, that's great. But actually, we also have payments that live under the pledge. And we actually need to filter the society membership based on qualities of the payment that's below the gift membership. Okay, so that tells us we probably can't get away with a single step report, although there's ways in which we could, which we'll dive into a little bit. So maybe we want to start with a multi-step report here. And so the admin was struggling. Hey, do I start with payments because I've got a filter on payments, or can I start with society membership? Society membership can filter upon its child of the pledge, but it can't reach past that one level. It can't go to the grandchildren in the filter to go down to payments. Okay, so then maybe we start with the gift pledge, because now we can access the society membership and the payments. But wait, if I start from gift pledge, I can't reach two levels away to the asset. So the admin started to feel stuck there. And I think my next slide is relevant. Yeah, so this is my very poor, quickly created Venn diagram here in Google Drawings. But essentially, the request was, okay, we want society memberships, but we want them filtered by these two related but not too close objects in order to get us this sweet spot. And so one of the things that I'm going to bring up as a concept, or as a trick maybe, when you're trying to think of where do I start, is using saved filters. So the admin said, okay, I'm going to create a filter that is based on payment characteristics on the opportunity or the pledge gift object. I'm going to save it. We've talked about that in past sessions, and it's going to live on that tab, on that object. And then what I could do is I can create a filter. I could start from society membership. I can create a filter that says, show me society memberships where the gift pledge ID is in filter, blah, blah, blah. And that will take care of the filtering on the payment that we need. And these are all concepts we've addressed in previous sessions. So that was great. But then the admin was struggling. The admin was trying to run this report, but was getting blanks in the lookup field, or in the lookup field to the gift pledge. And so we started to troubleshoot that. And lo and behold, what we realized was there was a junction object that I think was known, but it wasn't fully digested until we really started talking more about it and breaking it apart. So I've mentioned this before in previous sessions as well. A junction object is an object that is really kind of just a placeholder to connect two other objects. So there's this membership gift junction object that looks up to the pledge gift and looks up to the society membership. And so the admin was realizing why there were blanks, and it's because this society membership wasn't really looking up to the pledge. It's actually looking down to a junction object of gift membership, which then looks up to a pledge. So we have an extra object in there. And now we're even more kind of lost. Now, where do we start? I really need, I want the data on the report to be about society membership, but I want the filtering to be on payments and assets. And now we're just so far away. And so we kind of worked through it. And what we decided is we're going to have our first step in our multi-step report begin with this junction object. Now, we don't care about the data on this junction object. We only want this junction object to give us access to everything else. And so the first step we created was on the membership gift. We created another saved filter. I believe it was on the society membership that qualified the society memberships based on the asset. So we say in our first step, show me gift memberships where the society membership is in the filter for the assets, and then show me gift memberships where the pledge gifts ID is in the filter of payments. So now we've reached really far using both saved filters and starting from a junction object. And it got us to the point where we were properly qualifying in the first step, which we talked about last week as being kind of our audience builder. That's the step that tells us how far our report's going to go. We use the junction object with those filters to give us that. And then we didn't even pull fields from the junction object onto the report. We pretty much just grabbed society membership data because that's what we wanted. And then this kind of object as an object just kind of sat in the background, but our rows of reports were society membership data filtered by these other objects. I don't have a live example because this was from a client org, but I just thought this was a really good use case. It tells that story of how it gets more and more complicated and involves more and more objects. but also gave us the answer of where to start. So this is more of kind of a bullet point summary of kind of this concept of where do I start. So here's some kind of tips that we've pretty much talked about, but just want to talk a little bit more. So first, you want to think about what is the object that has the best access for the fields that you need. And in our case, it happened to be that junction object, even though it wasn't the object that we cared about in terms of fields being displayed. But what's the object that's going to give you the best access to the filtering and the fields that you care about for your report? And that's a good concept to start with in terms of where do I begin my step. Saved filters can help you reach farther. So we saved a filter down here on pledge that are looking at payments, but we were able to use the filter farther away. And then lookup fields, I haven't talked much about, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. Lookup fields can kind of be a cheat field. A lookup field can give you a value on a related object without having to have access to that object. So as a kind of concept there, if I'm on an opportunity, if I'm in a report and I am accessing the opportunity object, I can put my account ID, or sorry, my account lookup field on the report, therefore giving me kind of access to account, but really just the name of the account. But that might be all you really need sometimes. Sometimes you just kind of need to know that something's related, or you need to kind of group it by just what it's related to. And that might oftentimes give you just what you need. So lookup fields give you a way to add a field from a related object without accessing that object. And I should note that for this example, I'm using an NPSP, a nonprofit package demo org, just so that I could kind of look at payments here as a kind of synthesis to what we were looking at on the screen. So I'm on a payment report, and a payment lives under an opportunity, and then an opportunity lives under an account. So I actually don't have the account object in my list, but I can get the account object by just grabbing the lookup field. And remember, the link icon represents a lookup field. The other thing that you can do with a lookup field I've mentioned here is you can use the lookup field in a saved filter because it has an ID behind it. So you can say, whoa, what just happened? Let me go back to that report. See if I back up here, if it'll get there. You can use the lookup field, the ID behind it, to be in a filter. So I'm just going to kind of move forward, I think. I'll pause for a second. If there's folks that have other ideas about like decisions that they make when they're deciding how and where to start on a report, I'd love to hear kind of how you all think through it. But those were kind of some of the ideas that I thought to share in terms of how to make that decision. I think you really do want to have a good sense of your data model and the relationships so that you can use that knowledge and think, okay, I got to get to this field and this object is related to that object in this way. If you don't know that stuff, then I encourage you to dive into your schema builder like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which I think I have up here as a preview. If you go into setup and type in schema builder, you can get to your schema and pull up the objects that you want to look at, see how they're related, see what field is the lookup field that relates them, and that can help you make a decision on where to start. I don't see any comments from folks, but you're also welcome to unmute if you have any comments about decisions that you make to start multi-step reports. All right, then in that case, we're going to jump into our next topic that people were interested to hear more about, which is calculated fields. The way I'm going to approach this, because I'm definitely not a calculated field expert, is I am going to give you a ton of resources, which I'm about to put into the chat. I'm going to copy all these URLs. I'm also going to reference some of these resources and kind of just pull straight from them because they're great examples, and give you some of the tips and tricks that a lot of these resources provide. I'm going to spend some time looking at actual calculated fields and building them, but I'm going to try to just drop a bunch of knowledge that I've gained by looking through the resources, because I feel like those are the things that get missed and that are important to highlight. So what I'm going to do now is quickly copy this whole chunk of text into the chat. Let me move to everyone and drop that. All right. Did it work? I don't know. I don't think it worked. Hold on. There we go. All right. So you're welcome to copy that text and put it somewhere. You've probably been to a lot of these articles already, but I want to just call them out. So we have an article that it's not a big chunk of it, but it's our single step report article. And there's a section that talks a little bit more in depth about calculated fields, and it compares calculated fields to the aggregate fields or the metric fields. We have an article that talks about calculated fields as they're used in multi-step report. This one's got a lot more information about calculated fields in multi-step report. The single step report is kind of just a quick paragraph mention. The third article is a great one. I highly encourage you to check this out if you really want to utilize our calculated fields to their max. And this is a whole article that's dedicated like really specifically to how JavaScript plays into calculated fields, because JavaScript is the language that's needed for calculated fields. So I'm going to go to that article really quickly, and it's very thorough. It's very dense, but it has lots of good information. And I'm going to probably be referencing this article here and there as we talk through. So there's lots of great examples and descriptions of all the different things you can do. You can see each kind of category as like a different way to use calculated fields. It's awesome. And I'm going to come back to this in the future, but Apsona as a package has developed specific functions that are custom that allow you to do more with these other than kind of the standard JavaScript language. And then there's two videos. Our CTO Vijaytha did a great video right here. Whoops, sorry. Pardon me. Trying to get my little annotate tool. This is a great intro. It's really good. And honestly, half of my talk today is just going to be pulling straight from this. So I encourage you to look at it because I didn't include everything, but I got a lot of the good tidbits and the tips and tricks from it. It's a great video. This next video is also a great video. This is a webinar that one of our AffiniQuest folks, Lori Gardner, did, and she is kind of a calculated field expert and shows some really great stuff that is higher ed related to talk through how calculated fields make her work better. Let's go on to the next slide here. Okay, so let's just do a quick demo to acquaint people with the feature of calculated fields. I'm not going to go too deep, but I am going to show a couple things. So I'm going to go into the opportunity reports here and pull up this demo report. So this is a single step report here, not getting into multi-step yet. And we keep making sure everybody can talk if they need. Oops, I didn't mean to ask somebody to unmute if they saw that message. I was just trying to make you allowed to talk. Okay. So I'm in a basic opportunity single step report. And what I have here is if I look at these fields, I have the opportunity name, I have the opportunity amount, I have the opportunity close date. I don't think I have any filters, so this is just going to grab all the opportunities in the system and show stuff. And then I added two calculated fields. The way to add a calculated field from a single step report is right here, this little hyperlink. You just click it, it adds a calculated value cell. You pop it open, you can name it whatever you want. And then the place that you put the JavaScript code is going to be right here in this calculation box. You can also decide what field type, what output should be provided. One of the important things that you want to remember here is making sure that you're considering field types that you're drawing upon, and what is the field type that you're outputting to make sure that they're kind of in line and not conflicting. Session recordings. Oh, somebody asked for the link to the session recordings. Yes, let me grab that off screen really quick. I believe I have it saved now. This is going to be to our playlist. Okay, let me do that really quick here. I think I can get to it pretty fast. Playlist, training series, there it is.
Yeah, well,
the right
welcome, folks.
I think because I'm flying solo here, give me a sec. I will get that in there. There's an actual playlist link that gets you the whole playlist. And Chuck, I don't know if you're able to play on the side, but if you go to our playlist, I want to get the URL for the whole playlist, not one of the videos within. And I sometimes struggle to get that specific link. So that's how you add a calculated field to a single step report. You click the link, you name it, you decide your output, and you put in the calculation. I'm going to just reference a pre-built calculation just to kind of make things faster. So, and then we're going to talk about, after I do this quick demo of how to add fields, we're going to go into kind of some of the operators and then kind of to go into some troubleshooting. So I'm going to get into the meat. I'm just trying to kind of set the stage. So here, what I'm doing is I said, oh, I want to label my opportunities as enterprise customers if the amount is over 10,000 and label them as standard customers if it's under 10,000. Real basic concept. And so you can see here, I'll try to enlarge this a little bit. You basically, calculated fields can draw upon other fields in the report, and you use this specific syntax to call out a field. You kind of surround it with curly brackets and use this exclamation point, and this is saying, go find that field in the report, and we can see it's right here. And then is equal or greater than, and this is 10,000, that's just the number of the amount. And so we're asking that question, is the amount next door larger than 10,000? If so, then we're going to put the word enterprise into this cell. And if it's not, that's the colon means like otherwise, we're going to put the word standard. So let me shrink this back and let me run it. We're going to see here's 105,000. We have enterprise. Here's a $20 opportunity. We have standard. Pretty basic. Check. It's going to be the Apsona training series filtering and reporting is the playlist that we're looking for. Okay, so that's pretty basic and kind of exemplifies how these fields can be used at a very basic level. I got one more, purchase size. Thank you. Chuck just posted the playlist URL for folks that are interested in that. So I have purchase size. So this purchase size, Chuck can only paste to me. So let me put this out there. Thank you so much. Oh, darn it. I did the wrong one. This is what happens when I don't have my partner in crime, Rob, with me here. Okay, I just pasted the link to the playlist. Great. Okay, so back on the screen, I wanted to also show how you can use calculated fields to kind of do buckets in a way. So what I have here is a similar statement. I'm asking some questions, but I'm doing them in series. And by asking them in an order, I'm going to be able to produce one of many values, not just a basic statement of like, is it this, then this, but it's kind of a nested if formula, so to speak. So I'm asking, is the amount over 10,000 or sorry, under 10,000? If so, we're going to call it a small opportunity. If it is under 50,000, we're going to call it a medium opportunity. And if it doesn't fit into those two categories, it must be larger than 50,000. And therefore, we're going to call it large. So this is kind of a bucket concept. And then indeed, when we run this, we're going to see that played out. So I got 105,000, that's a large. I've got a 35,000, that's a medium. I've got a 20, that's a small. All right, so real basic examples. Just wanted to kind of put that down as a foundation. Let's do the same thing with a multi-step report. So I'm going to go to my multi-step reports. I'm going to find the demo. I had it all set up and then my screen refreshed. Calculated fields in MSR. Here we go. Edit. So the difference here, we're now in a multi-step report. So calculated fields are not necessarily a link underneath the fields that you have access to. Calculation fields become their own step. You can see right here, when it asks what kind of a step is this? Are we pulling fields from an object? Are we calculating, or are we doing a combined step, which we talked about last week? So you would actually choose the option here. So what I have is I have a step on account, and I'm just grabbing the name, the ID, and the state. And then I have a second step, which is a calculation step. And what's cool about these in multi-step is you can have kind of a whole step dedicated to calculations, and you could add multiple fields. You can have multiple calculation fields all next to each other to do a bunch of stuff on previous steps. I just have one as an example, but I wanted to note here that yes, on a single step report, you can add multiples, but on a multi-step report, you can kind of create a calculation step and then add a bunch of fields within it, and you could do it farther down. So I have another calculation step farther down after a data retrieval step above it. So it just gives you a little bit more ability there. The other thing that's really cool here is when you create, let's edit this this field here. When you're creating your JavaScript statement, you can actually go find a field in a previous step. I'm going to put my cursor at the end here, and I'm going to go grab the account ID. You click on it, and it actually puts the field in with the right syntax so that the statement can understand it. A real cool shortcut that MSR has that single step doesn't. Let me get rid of that so it doesn't error out on me. And so in this scenario, I'm just saying, I'm in California, so I'm saying, is this opportunity, is this account in state or out of state? Just a real simple example. I'm deciding what my result is going to be. It's going to be some text, so it's string, and then I'm basically calling out the fields. So when it comes to multi-step, you have to call out the step that the field is coming from. In the single step report, you're just putting the field in this syntax, but here you would say account dot, and then the field account billing state. And then does it equal California? If so, say that it's in state. If not, say that it's out of state. Real basic. And then if we run it, we're going to see that result. And then I'll kind of jump into some more of the meat of the presentation. So here we go. We've got all of these that are out of state, and then we have this one that's in state. Real basic. And you can see that it's its own step right here, and then it moves on to the opportunity step. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them out. Looks like everyone's just listening in. So let's go back to our slides, and now that we've kind of seen at a very base level how it works, let's talk about some of the meat here. So these are the pieces that I pulled out of some of our videos and some of our support articles and kind of rose them to the top because they come up a lot when it comes to like support cases, and they're just kind of like really central to being able to use these fields without a lot of practice or research into JavaScript as a language. So a couple things here. Double equals is one of the most common missteps that people do that we see in support cases when it comes to calculated steps. You almost will never use a single equal field or single equal character in one of these calculated fields. You almost always are going to use double. So double equals, in our case, what it means is it's asking a question. It's saying, does this field equal that value? So in this case, does close date equal 12/31/2023? If you use it as a single equals, what JavaScript language interprets that is basically telling a field to become that value. So it would be a statement rather than a question. Make this field equal to X. And so in our JavaScript, we're always referencing fields, we're asking questions about those fields, and then we're returning results. So you pretty much are going to always use double equals. So put that in your brain. That's going to save you from a support ticket in the future. Exclamation point and then equals. The exclamation point is often like, I don't know how you describe it, but it basically means no or not. And so this would mean not equals. So this is like, yes, it equals, or, does it equal? And this is like, does it not equal? If you need to kind of make two queries, like I want scenario A to be true and scenario B, that and function is going to be done by two ampersands right next to each other. That basically means and. We've already talked a little bit about this, that there's a specific syntax that you want to type in when you're putting in a field. You do the curly bracket, exclamation point, field name. One thing to note here is that you are always looking at the field name, whether it's multi-step or single step, that is up here. So, in Apsona, we can change these. We can customize our column labels, which is awesome. But once you customize it, you have to call upon that custom label. So you're always going to be putting in the text that matches these column labels. So in this case, you'd actually be putting in a space and a question mark. And so you're not referencing like the API name of the field. The calculated field is looking only at this report data, so it needs that column header. Okay, whoops, let me back up here. So we talked about, trying to get my annotate tool. This is how you call a field. And then as I mentioned before, in multi-step, you call the step and then the field. So step.field. Here's another one that gets people a lot, straight quotes versus curly quotes. So if I'm in the tool and I just start typing and I am putting in a value like 12/31/2023 and I put quotations around it, it usually works fine. But let's say you have kind of a JavaScript statement sitting in a Word doc that you've been building and you copy it and paste it in, it may give you an error. And that's because out of the box, a lot of these word processor tools will use these more, they're basically formatted quotes that kind of like, give you that visual, like here's the beginning quote and end quote, and they kind of look different. JavaScript doesn't like those. It can't handle those. It needs non-formatted straight quotes. So one of the tricks that I've learned from my coworkers is if you need to kind of type up a statement outside of Salesforce or Apsona and copy it in, try to use like a plain text editor. So I'm on a Mac. Here's my plain text editor. I go up to format, I say make plain text, and then I know it's not going to try to do any formatting. And then once I start typing my stuff, it's going to use the straight unformatted quotes. And then when I copy that over, it'll copy properly and it won't hit an error. But that is kind of next to the double equals sign. That's probably the next most common mistake, is that people use the wrong kind of quotes. Okay. Spaces, Chuck, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but spaces, as I understand, don't matter. So you could just type everything all in a row. Spaces help you to visually parse things out and understand it better, but they're not required. And if you don't have them, I don't think it hurts you.
Agreed. Generally, JavaScript interpreters ignore spaces.
Excellent, thank you.
Unless inside of quotes.
Good point. Yes, unless inside of quotes, because it's looking for a specific value. Okay, so here's some troubleshooting things. I literally copy and pasted this from the video because I was like, I can't do it better than what they've done. So we talked about equal sign assignment versus checking. So we always want to use double. We talked about the field references, data types, using the right data types. So if you want your result, if you're looking at an amount field and you want to return a number, you're not going to use string as your output. You're going to use number, or what's the technical term here? Let me get rid of this, go into edit. Let's look at our field options. Go to here, edit. So we've got Boolean, currency, date time, integer, number, percent, string. So you want to, if you may hit errors that have to do with field type, if you've built something and you're trying to put a number on the report, but you have string, then it's going to have trouble with that. So you just want to make sure that your result type is consistent with what you're trying to do. Parentheses should match the way you want values to be calculated. So basically think, actually here, I'll use this as an example because I started using parentheses here. So you want to think in terms of like a Salesforce formula, whatever you put into parentheses, that's going to be calculated as its own piece of work. It's going to do that calculation before doing the overall calculation. So what I think that I needed these parentheses. I may have been wrong, but what I did is I said, I want to ask a question and provide a result here. And then I want to add it to another, kind of statement. And then I want to add it to another statement. And so I use the parentheses to say, make sure you do this calculation of what's inside the parentheses before you do the larger calculation on everything combined. So I think plenty of people here are comfortable with using parentheses in Salesforce formulas. Sometimes they can be tricky. Sometimes they can give you the wrong results. So you just want to be cognizant of that and just pay attention. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Let's talk about some limitations that we have with calculated fields. Some of these apply to multi-step and some of them are more broad. So the first one says a calculated fields formula can only use fields from earlier steps, not from later ones. Additionally, if your multi-step report is split into more than one block because of linkages, the formula can only use fields available in the block in which the formula appears. So This calculation of years, how many years of purchases is based on the previous step of opportunities. If I were to take this calculated field and move it up in the order so it's above the step that it's looking at, it will not work. I tried it earlier, and instead of giving me the numbers that I wanted, it gave me a bunch of zeros. It didn't error on me, but it didn't give me the right data. So you always want to be looking up the chain when you're doing calculated fields. So I can have, a calculated field really far away from the step that I'm looking at, but it has to be above it. And then the multiple blocks is, we saw this last week. If you forget a linkage, the multi-step report will show up as two separate reports, essentially, because they're not linked together. So they don't go in line, they go into two separate blocks. And the point there is that if you have a calculated field, let's say on the second block, trying to reach the data in the first block, it's not going to be able to because it doesn't have that linkage. Okay, formulas may not use fields from other calculated steps, only from query steps. So I could not, in this last calculated step, I cannot go reference something in the previous calculated field step. You have to be accessing steps that are truly based on an object. Calculation steps cannot be moved up or down. Well, I can move them if I need to readjust their position. They just have to reference a field or a step above them. So I don't think you're literally blocked from moving it. It's just you have to be careful of how you're moving it. If you hide a step that a calculation field is looking at, you'll get an error. I'm 97% sure that's true because I tried it earlier, but I did see some of the folks on this call using a calculated step on a previous step, and I didn't see those previous steps. So I later on, maybe we could confirm with those folks. I think people were hiding the fields one by one in the final report and not hiding the whole step. You can't filter the report by calculated fields, so that's an important note, and that has come up a few times from folks. It's one thing to pull in, like if I have a metric field, so like I'm on the account step and I am, getting a metric field of like all of the opportunity amounts summed up at the account level. I could filter on that, even though that feels like a calculation. But when it comes to true calculated fields, you can't apply them in a filter. So they purely have to run on the data that's given in the report because they're only looking at the report. These fields are not really connected to Salesforce. They're just connected to your report. Calculated fields are designed for row level calculation. So let's just run this here. So I think I'm going to show this a little bit later, but just to kind of give you a preview, you can. So let's actually talk about it a little bit now because I think it'll help, and I may not get to it. I'm going to turn this off, column blocks. I'm going to run this. So normally when you run a report, here's Burlington. Burlington has whatever 7 or 8 opportunities under it, and so they stack vertically, right? I cannot take a calculation field and go look at every row's data within that grouping and kind of do something on it. I can only look sideways through the row. If I were to then change this step and show it in blocks, and I'll choose 4 as an example, now I've taken my vertical display and I've flipped it horizontally, and now I actually have a field label for every unique instance of the opportunity for these accounts, and I can call upon that. So now I can actually kind of do calculations on, kind of like multiple rows, but it's because they're in line horizontally. And oh, sorry, I think I moved. Oh no, here it is. This is now saying, okay, this calculation is looking at all 4 opportunities, or all 4 instances of opportunities, and asking the question of whether there was a purchase made that year, and then totaling up how many years there are purchases for here. And then if there's none, of course, it's returning 0. So kind of a cheat to be able to kind of analyze multiple rows at a time is by displaying them in column blocks. But other than that, well, not under that, I'll give you one other exception in a second, but in general, you can't do calculations on like a whole, like a column level assessment. They're designed to be row level calculations. The exception I'll describe, I will also put into the chat, is I think it's some of our custom stuff. So let me grab this URL. Oh, we're already at the 45 marker. Give me a second here. Did that not work? Row functions. There we go. Okay, so I can't speak too deeply to this, but there are some ways in which a calculated field can grab like the total of a column. So here, this column total function, I believe this is part of our custom Apsona functions. So we can get the column total if you have a number column that's adding up. You can grab the total from the bottom of that. You can also kind of do row counts. You can assess row number. So these are they're row level, but some of them kind of are looking at multiple rows at the same time. So that's as deep as I'll go there. But in general, these are row level formulas, and sometimes that isn't enough for folks. So that's just kind of the way that those are. All right, let's go back to, I think I lost my slideshow, so I'm going to go back into it. All right, I think we've talked about all those constraints. Let's see what's next here. This is just basically back to our JavaScript article. So I just want to highlight again that this is a really rich article. This is the Apsona custom functions, Apsona enhancements, and there's a bunch of stuff here that you can do that you can't do with standard JavaScript. Add days, a lot of like kind of day calculations. There's some formatting you can do. You can like add extra formatting. So just really, really rich stuff. Okay, I think, so now basically what we're at is I was going to kind of just talk more specifically about calculated fields, but I am going to hold off on that and just kind of pause and see, is there anything that people want to ask about that is related to this topic, or frankly related to any topic we've discussed, because we've only got about 15 more minutes and then our 6-week sessions are over. I am still available via support@apsona.com. And you know, there's going to be feature calls, but just want to throw that out there. If there's anything that people want to throw out, oh, we got one. Are there any JavaScript functionalities that Apsona does not support? So what I will say, and then Chuck can maybe fill in with a little bit more of an expert answer, is that my understanding is that any valid JavaScript language and function can be used in our calculated fields because they're designed to accept JavaScript. There are lots of other JavaScript customizations like the ones that we had in our article that would not work elsewhere, and vice versa. You might find something that's custom and try to bring it in and it won't work. And I think that's all true. But if it's just standard JavaScript language, it should be able to work. But again, the other constraint is we're working within a table of data, the report results. We're not looking into Salesforce records. So you got to have the data on the report to be able to kind of work through it and manipulate. Does that sound about right, Chuck? Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple things for the advanced folks out there. If you're doing string replacement or using the backtick as a string separator, that might blow it up because it is a custom JavaScript interpreter that it's a string that ends up getting evaluated. So there's that. And also, I've been trying to experiment with functions, and I haven't actually had full success with functions, even though there's documentation saying that we could do it. But I haven't I went in real heavy with my initial attempt. Functions, I would just kind of throw out there, if you're having trouble or trying to do something really complex, make a really complex decision, consider a function that would go in the place, and you can just then drop in full JavaScript function and return. That's my understanding. Haven't had success yet, but it is in our documentation.
Excellent. Either I had a weak connection and lost the audio, or you did, Chuck. So some of it I didn't hear, but hopefully it got on the recording. Okay, cool. Thank you for that question. And if there's any other questions, feel free to throw them out. I think to kind of fill space here, I am going to just keep talking and looking at some of the slides, but I will do my best to pay attention to chat and questions in case something comes up. So I'm just going to keep cruising here until the end of the call, and then we'll be good to go. So I think we've covered most of this, but this is just talking about different, how you would work with different field types. So if I want to ask about a date, I'm going to ask about that date within quotes, even though it is kind of numbers in a sense. It needs to be seen as kind of text to search for it. A text field obviously needs to be in quotes. A currency or a number does not need to be in quotes. You can work with lookup fields as well. And this example is saying, hey, I want to find a record where the primary contact is there, that it has a primary contact. And so I'm saying this lookup field is not null, and that's a valid use for that field type. Okay, let's just keep cruising here. So this is talking about kind of if-then statements. We've already highlighted some of this in the examples. I earlier said if the amount is above or equal to 10,000, show enterprise, otherwise standard. So to break this down again a little bit further, we are asking our initial condition here. So is the amount greater than 10,000? And the question mark is signifying that we're asking that question. And then right after that question mark is the answer that we're going to provide if it's true. So you don't have to do anything in between. You just say that this is going to be the true response. The colon then means otherwise, and then this is the non-true response if it's false. Oh, another cool trick is if you simply put the field in with a question mark without any operator, what that represents is I'm just trying to see if there's a value in this field, in this cell. So if you're looking for like, a non-empty cell, you just put the field in, and if there's something there, it's going to be true. Cool. This is talking about how you can concatenate things. So you can reference multiple fields and build a statement. I think we saw an example of that last week or the week before, where you can say, does this person have a salutation? Here's an example of just an existence question. If there's a salutation, then show the salutation with a period and a space, and then show the name, and then it can concatenate a bunch of values together. If there's not a salutation, then just show the name, because we don't need the salutation. So this is a cool way to just combine a bunch of data into a nice looking string. And then we also talked about this already, but just the ability to have multiple if-then statements. So first ask if this is true, and then ask if that is true, and then ask if the other thing's true. And you can then essentially use that as kind of a bucketing concept. Here's just another example that also indicates the importance of order. So this was from one of our videos, and the presenter said, let's say that they wanted to group the year that was on the record into decades. And so the example was the year was 1965 on a record. And so she was asking things in a particular order, first starting at the earliest decade and saying, is the date on or before 1949? If so, then we're going to call it the 1940s. Then we're going to ask, is it on or before 1959? Then we're going to show 1950s. And so you'll note that something can be on or before 1959 and 1949. So it's satisfying both of these, but because of the order that we're asking, we're going to basically just return the result when it meets a true and then stop. And so for a record that has 1965, the first two rows are going to be false, the last row is 1965 on or before 1969. Yes, then I'm going to show 1960s, and I'm not going to look at the rest of these. So order can impact the result of your calculated field. We talked about this already. I was wanting to make sure that we got to it. So I talked about it earlier, which is that you can do calculations on column block data. And this is the URL. Let me get this, copy that, put it down here. And I kind of like to highlight this because it's a really powerful way to kind of like analyze multiple returns for the same grouping. But it's just tiny little mention in the article. It doesn't have a whole section dedicated. It's just this one statement. So I just like highlighting it. Take a look at that. I think that might be all I have, folks. Yes, that's all I got. Just know that we're on YouTube. We have a great events page on our LinkedIn page that tells about upcoming events. We're starting to do more demos on our regular products in a repeating cadence. So if you're interested in learning about one of our products and you haven't seen a demo, come and sign up for one of those. Anybody's welcome. And we're going to repeat them monthly and even twice a month when we're able to. You can always email us at sales@Apsona with questions about licensing or products, support at Apsona. I'm developing a new support request form that I've started to kind of include in some of my emails so that some people are using it, but it's going to get even better and be able to potentially answer questions before you submit, and then you don't have to deal with a case. So look for that. And then we always have twice weekly Apsona office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Everyone is welcome. And those are great areas to get your question answered, but also just learn from each other. There's a lot of peer learning that goes on there. And those are the URL versions for people on the video if they need to get to that. And I think that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you so much for this last 6 weeks. It's been really, really fun and a really interesting challenge for me to kind of come up with the content. And so I feel like I've got a great product, and you are all a great audience with amazing questions. So thank you so much for your participation. And I hope that the series continues to service you as we go forward. All right, thanks.